Everyone, thanks so much for joining me this morning for our session on media and PR for small business. My name's Kristy Bailey. I am an advisor and also a presenter for Business Station as part of the federal initiative Digital Solutions Program. So a lot of what I'm going to go through today is going to be based on my personal experience. I also have a marketing business. So a lot of what we're talking about are things that I do on a daily basis, or at least very regularly. So please feel free to use the chat functionality or put your hand up by way of the reactions at any time if you've got any questions. Today's webinar is designed to be as interactive as possible, so we'd really encourage you to pop in any questions and try and relate to anything that I'm saying back to your business. So I'll also have some time at the end for questions, but I would encourage you to stop as we go as well. All right, so what we're going to go through today, we're going to talk about the importance of PR, in particular for small businesses. We'll define the term PR and media, as well as media relations. There's some differences there, so we'll just discuss what they are. We'll talk about generating publicity and how you can generate publicity for yourself and your business. We'll touch on working with influencers. You may or may not have had experience with that side of social media marketing in the past, but it can be great. So we'll have a chat about that. We'll talk about the customer journey and then social media and your PR strategy as well as a lot of other interesting stuff along the way. All right, so getting started, just to define media. So what is media? Well, media is essentially the main means of mass communication. So information is delivered to the public and it's done through the media, being newspapers, magazines, television, radio, and of course now there are a huge number of ways online that the media can deliver these communications to us. So when people think of the term media, quite often they do think traditional media or news outlets, but it's really not the case. It's so much more, and there are an unbelievable number of media outlets that you guys as small businesses will not only experience on a daily basis, but can potentially tap into. There's social media as well, which is huge, influential bloggers, which we've touched on. There's even YouTube influencers, there's online publications, there's podcasts, and all of that can be harnessed to help publicize your business. So in a traditional sense, journalists and reporters were the people that write or present the news or feature stories, and then editors control the final content. But what we do know about media is that it's not often editors that are controlling the final content. Everyone controls the content in the modern day media. So what you see here is what we call the peso model. So it is a media model strategy. Peso stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned media. It's really important to understand what you're doing in PR or in media and even in marketing and where it fits into this particular model. The reason being is that you have to use a variety of strategies across different mediums, and you have to be doing something in each of those spaces. So in the past, paid media was really the primary focus of advertising, and then earned media was the primary focus of PR. Shared and owned wasn't really anyone's focus, but because there's so much crossover in each of these elements, it has to be a key objective that you are doing something in each of the spaces. So just to expand, paid is fairly self-explanatory. It's advertising, advertorials, sponsorships, sponsored content. So it's content that you pay for. It could include the traditional forms of media, so ads on the radio, TV, and print, or other paid activities, but it also includes online ads, your pay-per-click stuff, and your Google AdWords, social media advertising, Facebook, Instagram, etc., sponsored posts and banner ads. So if there's any kind of transaction, it essentially sits in that paid space. Earned is then your news coverage. So earned media is when you've earned the opportunity, and quite often this is through your amazing media relations, which we're going to talk all about, but you've earned that right to appear in a news story. Media will be in a specific publication as press coverage, but it will then generally, whether it's a traditional outlet or it's online, it will normally include backlinks through to your business as well. So there's generally always an online component. Now, because of the association with viral content, earned media has the potential to reach a huge number of customers, a lot more than paid or owned media, and it's generally a lot more believable as well. So then you've got shared, which is social media. Essentially, shared media is user-generated content. So it's not created by you as such. It's created by your people or the public, and it really continually evolves. So what happens here is actually largely a result of a combination of your marketing and your customer service. So keep that in mind. You can't afford any negative relations with your customers at any stage of their purchase cycle, because it will come out here in this shared media space. Owned media is then your owned assets. So things like your web content. Owned media is content that you've created and you have full control over. So it could be your website, it could be your blog. You could have written books, ebooks, white papers or presentations, anything like that. So the way you know if it's owned is basically you fully control the content and its distribution. So if you can add to it, edit it, or delete it, then you own it, most likely. Now, each category is a lot more effective when they're used in conjunction with each other, as opposed to in isolation. So we'll refer back to this peso model, but it's really important to keep it in mind to make sure that you're doing everything you can in each aspect of media to get full reach. Now, we've just had someone ask, where do your social posts come in? Now, your social posts come into your shared space. So what you have to keep in mind is that you don't own your social media accounts. So that's not considered owned content. So it is really important to understand that. Some businesses focus their entire marketing strategy on just social media, for example. This is not owned, it's a shared space. And that means, yes, you can add, edit, delete that content, but it's shared in the sense that it's not your own asset. And many people can have input in that. So social advertising also comes into a combination of both the paid and the shared space. So I hope that answers your question. Now, in terms of PR, so what is public relations? Now, public relations sits in that earned space, as I mentioned. Now, it's a strategic communication process, essentially, that builds amazing relationships between your organisation and the public. So in very simple terms, PR, I believe, is having a sound strategy plus really good storytelling. So as a small business, you might not think that you're in the business of or even in the need of public relations, but you absolutely are. If you think back to that peso model on the slide earlier, that's your earned and your shared component. So keep that in mind. Public relations is really crucial to the success of every business. It doesn't matter how big or small you are. The difference is that a small business is generally a lot more budget conscious and doesn't have the luxury of hiring a PR firm as such. So you really just have to take that more DIY approach and master your own public relations, which is what we're going to go through today, ways that you can really harness that yourself. All right, so this is a really interesting image because it's looking at media then versus now. And it's amazing to think how the media space has evolved. So in the past, brands controlled the messages and customers were simply passive receptors. So let's say a business had a story to tell. They would hire a publicist who was a bit of a spin doctor, was able to craft an interesting story out of whatever it was that the business was trying to communicate. They then had media relations or good media relationships. And this was their absolute goal because that would result in that story getting published. So everything was very brand driven. Now it's very, very different in that customers are very empowered and everyone owns the message. So there's a lot of simultaneous communications. Traditional media are just one outlet for customers. So it is very interesting to note that we don't have, as marketers or as small businesses, we don't really have that ability to craft a story anymore because everyone can own and be a part of that message. So generating positive media coverage or that publicity is an absolutely core function of a PR person, but it's just one of many functions. So that's more of a publicist type role, and that doesn't really talk about the research and strategy and all the messaging of the entire brand, or the entire brand message, I guess you could say, that really goes into a successful public relations program. So publicists just produce a transaction, whereas as a PR person within your business, you'll build relationships and you'll get positive results across all forms of media in all of those spaces that we discussed. So hopefully that makes sense. But the key message here is really that customers are empowered more than they have ever been before. So we need to really look at ways to take advantage of that. Okay, so just going back to the publicity side of things and building media relations, to get publicity, you have to have good media relations, generally speaking. So building these relationships with the media is good because journalists really enjoy dealing with people that can assist them in their work or make their job a bit easier. And as you know, today media is so fast-paced that they don't have time to sit there as journalists and research stories and, you know, come up with these things themselves. It is fast-paced, it's very competitive. So if you can provide them with an easy story, something that's going to be of interest to their audience, it's going to be a win for both of you, but you have to have that relationship in place first. So first of all, in terms of building good media relations, I think it's a bit of a stepped approach. I think first of all, you have to have a really good news sense. So you have to know what each outlet presents, what type of items might be of interest to them. You have to know who their audience is, and that could be, you know, this could be traditional media or online media. But always look at what they've produced in the past to determine what they like to write about. It's really important to develop an understanding of the difference between a news and a feature journalist as well, and then consumer and trade publications. So a news journalist will be writing more factual stories, whereas a features journalist will be, that'll be sort of more planned on a specific topic. Consumer media will look for stories that appeal to the public, and then trade media will be interested in material that's of interest to the industry or the particular trade publication that they're writing for. So having that news sense, and that comes with time. It comes with doing your research and not just, you know, sitting down doing some desktop research. Over time, reading publications and understanding where your business might fit into the particular media outlet. Also, knowing lead times is really important. You have to know what deadlines there are for the particular media that you're targeting. If you've got something happening on Friday and their publication or, you know, even their social posts don't come out for another week after that, it might be too late. The information might not be relevant. So, you know, for example, news items for print, radio and television have short lead times and can appear really quickly. On social media, things can appear instantly. Feature articles are then planned well in advance. You know, it could be a number of months in advance that they're planning feature articles. So kind of having that that news sense will allow you to learn things like lead times as well. Now, knowing specific people is really important. Getting the names of journalists, getting their contact details, knowing how they like to receive media releases or information, and keeping some kind of database is also crucial. Now, you know, a big question that I get is, how do you get to these people? How do you get to know them? How do you get their details? I think there's a number of ways. Obviously, as you're developing that news sense, you'll see whatever you're reading, whether it's online or offline, there's generally the journalist's name associated with whatever the media outlet is or the particular story that you're reading. So that's a really good way. Obviously, a bit of work on researching through platforms like LinkedIn can be really helpful. And then reaching out at networking events if you've got that opportunity as well. So knowing those specific people, but more than just knowing them, actually keeping a database is really important. Being accurate is also really important. So always provide accurate information and do so on time. Now, this is obviously crucial, and you would know this, I'm sure, if you are on any social media channels, but a lot of the time media will produce stories that may be slightly inaccurate, and then consumers will get on there and correct them. So if you're providing them information, there is a chance that they will just publish it straight away without fact checking. So making sure that you don't be the one that sort of causes them to produce inaccurate articles or publish inaccurate articles is really important as well. If you're the contact on a media release, make sure that you're responsive as well. So make sure that you provide them information on time. If they've asked for something, get back to them straight away. So that accuracy and being on time is really crucial. I would also invite them to see or experience your product or service if it's appropriate. So everyone online today is in a range of different businesses and a range of different industries. So it might not always be appropriate to invite them to see or experience your product or service, but you could be having an event. You might invite them to meet you if you're trying to get some publicity on who you are as a business owner and your story. So don't hesitate to do that. I think that's really valuable as well. Get to know local media as well. So just really make an effort to know who those local media contacts are. So things like your community newspapers, they obviously have offline and online profiles. They're always hungry for news, particularly news that is relevant to the specific area that they're in. So keep that in mind. Again, developing this news sense in your local area, you'll know who your local media contacts are. So reach out to them and introduce yourself and your business. Once you do have these relationships in place, make sure that you make regular contact. Obviously, it takes time to establish the relationship and it takes time to research and get to the point that you've got a good database. But once you do, make sure that you're keeping in touch so that you're not letting that relationship sort of slip. Don't obviously get in touch with them too often to annoy them. It will only be when you've got something of interest to say or reaching out to see if they're doing any feature work or anything like that. So obviously the last thing we want to do is hinder their workload by annoying them. Just also keep in mind what we're talking about here is building media relations for the purpose of publicity. Publicity is just a tactic. It's one component of the peso chart that I showed you. It does require a planned strategy to develop your full public relations, and it does take time. So keep that in mind. And each of the areas that we'll be going through today will sort of highlight different components of that peso model. Okay, so looking again at that earned space, publicity is all about spreading the word about your business, and it's generally through non-advertising channels and earning media. So through the good media relations that we've just discussed, you'll know who the media are, you'll know how to maintain a good relationship with them, but you still need to keep in mind that they're going to want newsworthy stories that are on time, and when I say on time, I mean timely, so relevant to the time that you're giving it to them, that are generally different or unique, have perhaps some kind of human interest element to them. So something that they can report on that is going to perk the interest of their audience. Okay, so once you've done that, you can communicate with, or once you've determined that you've got a story or something that's going to be of interest, you can then communicate with the media in a number of ways. The most common is a media release and writing a media release. So we're going to talk about how a media release is structured in just a minute. You might also produce a newsletter, so something that goes out to your consumers. You might have also the ability to send that out to a media database. So if they are aware of something that's going on within your business, rather than you pitching to them, hey, I've got a story, do you want to write about it? They might see something and go, oh, there's a yoga event happening at this organization next week, and I just happen to be writing about yoga, and it's part of a bigger story. So you don't always know what the journalists are planning, obviously. In both of those cases, you have to have some great visuals, or in all cases you do. So photographs, images, videos, anything that adds to the content that you're speaking about and that can be used by the outlet. You can then use distribution centers to get it out, and you can use social media. So making sure that you share, you tag, use hashtags and that kind of thing to tap into these outlets, social media as well. All right, so just looking at the structure of a media release, a media release is a tough one. If you're not a writer, or even if you do write for your business, it can be hard to get your head around a media release. A media release is factual information. It's a document that you send out to the media that details anything that could be classified as news. Journalists will then take that media release, and if they find it interesting, they'll write an article about it. So depending on the journalist and the publication, a lot of the time they'll just publish what they read. And as I said earlier, they'll fact check later, if at all. They might leave it up to the audience to do the fact checking for them. And that's really common on social media. So a lot of the time the public's on there correcting the story. And it happens because the news world is so fast paced. Journalists would rather be the first to publish something, even if it's slightly inaccurate, than waste time fact checking, and have someone else produce a story about this particular topic first. So if you've got something newsworthy and someone picks it up, the best thing about it is that it's a promotion for your business, and it's generally free. So if it's a newspaper or a magazine publication, they will generally, as I said earlier, will have a website, they'll have social media channels. So quite often your story will get multiple forms of promotion across a lot of different channels, so more than just print generally. You get that free marketing through whatever the media avenue is, but that's also good for SEO if you've got links online back to your website. So it would generally results in increased traffic to your website as well. And it's a great way to build your brand. So I also believe that having your story published is a great way to gain credibility within either the industry or to consumers. So keep that in mind, but also keep in mind it's very competitive. You have to make sure that your media release is the one that grabs the attention of journalists. The best media releases are written in this format that you see here. You will obviously have a headline, which is not featured on that inverted pyramid that you see there. But the headline is really important. If you're sending media releases out by email, that's going to form your subject line as well. So it's really got to get the attention of the journalist. The first part of the actual media release, though, is the lead. So this is generally the most newsworthy information, the who, what, where, when, why, and it's really, that becomes a hook to draw people in further. Then you've got the body. Now, this will be the important details, the main argument to your story, and then evidence and quotes. So evidence and quotes are really important. So you have to back up what you're saying. Let's say you released a new product and it was, the best new whatever in Australia, or the first time this had ever appeared in Australia. It's great to say that, and that's absolutely fine, but what evidence do you have to back that up, or who can you quote to back up that kind of the main argument? So it could be that there is an industry leader in your particular industry and they say it's absolutely fabulous to have this product launched for the very first time in Australia. We're excited, as an industry, we're excited to be a part of that. That is then an external person backing up what you're saying to give it credibility. So quotes, I believe, are hugely important. Make sure it is someone authoritative, someone that is generally not connected to the business. However, in saying that, all media releases are written in third person, not first person. So if it's you, say you're the CEO, the owner of the business, you could be quoting yourself in there, but nobody knows that you're writing the story, because obviously a journalist is going to translate that and write it as their own anyway. So keep that in mind. If you're getting a quote, make sure that that person has agreed for their quote to be published, and obviously make sure that it is a genuine and a real quote. Don't just make it up. It's very common to, ask somebody if you can quote them in print, and have you got a statement that I can say, or they might say something to you at a function. For example, let's say, go back to that product, you're launching this product at a function, but you've also pre-written a media release about it. That industry leader might say to you, this is so fantastic to have this product launched for the first time in Australia. You could then say, hey, I'm writing a media release. Do you mind if I quote you on that? And if they say yes, that's absolutely fine. But just getting an approval is a key thing. But it really establishes your credibility to have some kind of backing there. Then you've got the tail. Now, the tail is just extra related information. So perhaps a little bit of background on your business. The business was established in 2015, is one of 5 in Perth, or whatever that might be. Any extra content there that's not related to the story, but the journalist would perhaps need to know. And then, of course, your contact details. So who is the best media contact? And make sure that if that person isn't you, that person knows that they're a media contact and will answer any media inquiries very quickly. So that's the structure of a media release. I find the hardest part in writing a media release is to not fluff it up. So I think if any of you guys are in marketing, or even, used to talking about your own small business, we get this tendency to want to add emotion and, emphasis to things, but a media release is designed to be quite factual. You have to have those key components, but you wouldn't be using exclamation marks and descriptive words and that kind of thing. So it is fairly standard. The information has to be there, the credibility has to be established, and the story has to be of interest, and then you've got those visuals that back it up as well. So keep that in mind. That's the general structure. You would never expect to write a media release just off the cuff unless you are an experienced media release writer. It generally takes a few goes, I should say, at getting it right. So write it, have a read of it. Is there too much emotion in it? Is it factual enough? Is it a strong enough argument? So is it actually strong enough to gain interest from a journalist? You might then have to put a different spin on things. So writing a media release does take time, but once you start and get into the swing of things and you've got your first one and you've edited it 100 times and you're happy with it, you'll find subsequent media releases a lot easier. But once you have done all that, you then have to distribute it. So you've got that thing that's interesting to say, you've written an amazing media release about it, complete with quotes and evidence and really establishing your credibility. Now you've got to get it out. So to get good reach with your media releases, you have to have that database of media that I mentioned, and make sure that you've got the right contacts so that you're getting the exposure that you're chasing. So that's the part of it that takes time. That's the media relations side of things. But as a starting point, if you're not sure who to distribute to, I would say obviously local newspapers, they tend to be quite an easy win because they are looking for interesting local content. Local broadcasters, TV and radio, if that's relevant. I would also look at industry-specific publications. So thinking away from consumer media, go to trade media and start thinking about what kind of coverage you might be able to get there. Obviously, you want that consumer media focus as well, but that trade publications really establish your credibility as an organisation to other people in your industry. So think about what industry-specific publications there might be. If you're a member of your local Chamber of Commerce, they generally have newsletters and other publications that they bring out. So that could be of interest, or any other relevant membership organisations that you are a part of. Now, that could be at a national, a state, or it could be at a regional level. I did touch on this earlier, but you can also then get greater distribution through media agencies or distribution centres. AAP is an example of that. But I find if you've done the groundwork in terms of establishing that database, you won't really need to use media agencies. It would be better to have that personal approach. You do need to make sure that the media release is addressed to the right person, obviously, otherwise they may never receive it. And if you're not sure, mark it for attention of the person's title. So for example, it could be the food editor if you're a restaurant or a cafe or something like that, or the travel editor, or whatever the specific section is that you're looking at. Obviously, email distribution is fine. It's very widely accepted, but where possible, paste your media release into the body of an email rather than adding it as an attachment. So it's just one less step that a journalist is going to have to do in the case that they do want to publish your article, or read even, the first section to see if they're interested. Use those media relationships and that database to establish how they like to receive media as well. So I would just check on that and go back to your database and go, all right, yeah, I remember speaking to that person. They said always email another person, or whatever that might be. Always send it with images that are of a reasonable resolution, not too small in case they use them, and not too large to block up their emails. So, an attachment of an image is fine, but just maybe if it's a medium resolution, maybe you will put a note on there as part of that bottom part of the media release, the extra information. You might say, contact me for high-res images for publishing or something like that. If you're sending it by email, use the BCC function so that a long list of journalists' email addresses are appearing on each other's emails. So that's obviously etiquette, but professionalism as well. Also keep in mind that you might need to tailor your media release for each audience. So you might not be able to do the BCC and send it out to your whole media database. You might have to tailor it to go, all right, well, this is a trade publication. I'm going to tweak it so that it's more trade focused. This is a publication specific to the type of product, and this is a general news publication. So you might have 3 or 4 versions of the same media release, and that's absolutely fine as well. Now, I also touched on the subject line earlier, but use that to get the journalist's interest. I quite often get emails that are media releases, and the subject lines is something along the lines of Business Station media release or something like that. Obviously, if it's coming to a journalist, there's a good chance it's media related. So that doesn't doesn't have any value to you as a business to do something like that. Get your headline of the story and use that as your subject line, because it should be a hook. So it should be around 5 words, and it should absolutely draw the reader in. And as you guys know, I'm sure, I know I do this, and I'm sure you do, but you look at your emails, and if that subject, if you're not entirely sure where the emails come from or who it's come from, and that subject line isn't relevant to you, then you're going to delete it straight away. So make sure that you really make use of the subject line and the headline, and make sure that it really does draw the reader in. And the reader, in this case of a media release, is going to be the journalist or the media outlet that may decide to then publish your story. So hopefully that makes sense. Just to go back to this peso model before we go on, publicity is what we've been talking about when it comes to media releases and coverage in publications. So that's just about the earned media space, whereas, as you know, public relations is about all media. So, but what I can tell you is that publicity, whilst it sits in the earned media, it goes over into the shared media because of social media. All right, so that will actually cover off both of those areas a lot of the time as well. But PR in general fits in with each element of this peso model, and it has to be incorporated into your entire marketing strategy. So now we're going to talk about influencers who sit in that shared, but also in the paid space. So as you can tell, there's quite a bit of crossover here. So social influencers, you might know the term. It really isn't anything new. They've been around in various forms forever. So think about, 50 years ago when certain people would be invited to high profile people would be invited to functions to draw in more of a crowd or to establish the function's credibility. It's very similar now with social influencers. So essentially, influencers are people that possess a significant credibility or considerable reach within a target audience, and it largely revolves around the internet. Influencer marketing is really popular and effective. If you haven't already experienced it or been involved in it, it can be a very low-cost way to generate some positive PR. Influencers do have the power to affect purchasing decisions of others, and it's generally because of their authority. It could be because of their knowledge of a particular subject matter, their position, or their relationship with their audience that they've worked on for some time. Or even a distinct niche that they sort of actively engage with. So the size of the following will depend on the size of the topic or their niche and who they are. But it could be topic leaders, it could topic experts, or thought leaders or brand advocates, and they could come by way of bloggers, YouTubers, podcasters, social media influencers. They could be celebrities, or even journalists can have big followings and, represent an opportunity for influencer marketing as well as academics, professional advisors, or other industry experts. So The term does cover a wide range of people, but essentially they're people that have this above average influence on their specific audience. So in my opinion, social media has really devalued this form of PR because there are a large number of fakes, or maybe not fake, but wannabe influencers that will tell you they have a huge number of followers and they want something for nothing in order to cover your product or service in their social media channels. But this particular transaction, in terms of, as a business, you've determined that you need some coverage in that shared space, and you're happy to sort of pay for it or have some kind of transaction, and you want exposure to a distinct audience or to a larger audience. This can be absolutely fantastic. But it's very important that you choose the right influencer. So true influencer marketing should be directed by you, I believe. So, for example, you approach them, not the other way around. So it does involve leveraging the influencers in your content marketing as much as in theirs. So on your website, your socials, your blogs, as well as what they can offer on theirs. So it has a huge number of benefits. Obviously, you get that increased exposure, which can result in increased traffic to your website. That can also result in increased leads or customers. So that's kind of the key thing. And the reason it works is because we trust friends, colleagues, or experts more than we trust advertising. So it's not perceived to be advertising. Someone is endorsing it. So marketers who appreciate that and do spend some time creating authentic relationships with influencers, who are then creating authentic relationships with their people as well, will see success in this area. But the key thing with influencer marketing is that your audience and their audience must be perfectly aligned, in that you must know your target market and you must know the influencer's audience and make sure that they represent who your target market would be. So there is a key criteria that I believe you should determine if it will work for both your company and theirs by using. So I think, first of all, the first component of that key criteria is the value to the influencer. So what's in it for them? How much is it going to cost you? It's not going to be free. So is it a financial transaction, as in they're invoicing you and you're paying a set amount? Or are you offering something to them in exchange for some deliverables? It could be an experience, it could be products, etc. So first of all, you need to know that, and you need to know if that meets your budget or what you're willing to do. The second thing is their demographics of their audience. So does their audience match your specific target market? So I have a lot of influencers reach out for the various brands and products and services that I work with. And a lot of the time the emails go along the lines of, my name's da-da-da, I have an audience, or I have 10,000 followers. I'd really like to experience your product or service, whatever that might be. In exchange, I will do 3 social media posts, etc., etc. The first thing that I do is look at who they are and start doing a bit of a background check by way of going onto their socials, having a look at what their audience looks like, how engaged their audience is. I look at their past posts, look at the likes, the comments, the shares on there, and look for that true or genuine conversation on them, because the engagement that they have with their audience is really important. I do look at the size of their audience, but size alone isn't enough. That engagement is really important. But I look at the type of people that are in their audience. Are they male, female? What sort of age bracket are they? What are their comments like? What past products and services has this influencer covered? And really spend that time to get to know them. I also look at the quality of their writing style, their photography, and make sure that all of that matches my company's or matches the target market. So those criteria are absolutely crucial. You really have to do your research and look at all elements here. Sorry, I've just seen someone pop something into the Q&A function. Sorry, I didn't see that earlier, but someone's asked, are influencers the same as brand ambassadors? Yes, very, very similar. However, a brand ambassador is generally more of a high profile person, and we think here about celebrities or people that have a significant, I guess, people know them in the public, whereas an influencer tends to have more of a niche audience that's specific, that's a specific target market, so not as much of a mass audience, if that makes sense. Not sure if I've explained that correctly, but brand ambassadors, you tend to see, and they could be anyone from sporting people to celebrities to, you know, industry type people. Whereas chances are, if you're following an influencer, you wouldn't know them if you walked past them in the street as such. So it's an extremely similar concept, but just it differs in the way that it's carried out, essentially. I would also look at their connection to other influencers as well. So have a look at if they are connected to other influencers. Are they respected? Are they known? That kind of thing. So I think influencer marketing is a fabulous form of PR if you can use it right, as are brand ambassadors. But think about your budgets here. So generally, a brand ambassador will want a significant fee or payment. And I find that with influencers, they tend to want in-kind sort of things. So, you know, they'll want a product or experience or you know, in exchange for what they're going to offer. It's really, really important that you quantify what that looks like. So how many posts, how many stories, are they going to write a blog? Is that blog going to link back to your website? Can you use their content on your socials as well once they've posted, doing reposts and that kind of thing? So it has to be more, you know, it has to be, I guess, viable for you and for them. So there has to be that ability to meet in the middle there and get that package right, but there has to be set deliverables, which is a really key thing. I wouldn't assume that anything will just be done. I would have it in writing exactly what that is. And try to take that off a social media channel as well. So I would really try and identify, you know, what their email address is and have some kind of contract in place. And at what stage are you going to give them the free products or experiences? Do they need the products up front before they can obviously then post about them? So there is a risk there. It's really important that you get it right, but a great form of PR if you do get it right. So how else can you generate good PR? Well, the key way that you can generate good PR is from your customers. But to get good PR from your customers and valuable PR, you have to engage with them. So a really interesting statistic is that 88% of people are influenced by reviews and online comments, so that shared media space. So considering that, do you know what people are saying about you online, and are you part of that conversation? Because social pressure can really tarnish your branding as quickly as you grow it. Fingertips are always on the move. So a key factor of PR is that you know what's being said about you and you're there to join the conversation. So someone could be waiting in line a bit long or disgruntled about a service. They can quickly let their friends know. If they've enjoyed using a product or a service, there's a number of ways that they can review that. So there's specific platforms as well as Google reviews, there's TripAdvisor, there's Urban Spoon, there's a lot of different ways that they can actually provide this feedback. No business is perfect, so I would assume that virtually everyone in any industry will have to deal with customer complaints at some point. So it could be something simple as, you know, getting an order slightly wrong, or it could be a massive breakdown within the customer service process. But it's so crucial that you handle complaints quickly and handle them well. And there are reasons that we don't handle complaints well, but it's important that you do so that they don't make it online. But generally the reasons that we don't handle complaints well are because we're too busy. Again, as a small business, this is a trap that you can really fall into, being too busy to actually work through a complaint or to deliver a quality product or service. Being defensive if there is a complaint or any feedback. And I see this all the time online. Small business owners And as small business owners, we're so passionate and emotional, or have that emotional link to our products or services, which is why our businesses are so special. But what that can result is sometimes being a little bit defensive in terms of the response to customers, particularly when they're one of those customers that, probably shouldn't have complained, or maybe the complaint wasn't justified. You know that. But it's really important that you tactfully handle that complaint and don't be defensive. If you have staff can be intimidated by a lack of training. So make sure that they are trained on complaint handling, because that can be a key reason that why they don't handle complaints very well, or they could be unsure of their empowerment. So they might not know that if someone complained about a product, they could upgrade them or give them something to try and compensate them. So make sure that you've got those clear procedures and that there's no procedure breakdown. So those reasons that we don't handle complaints quickly and well can have a really serious impact on your shared media space and result in some serious negative PR. Now, I've even seen what I consider to be a minor complaint end up on the nightly news. So this example, and it was a couple of years ago, but it was a restaurant that had somebody had gone there and purchased a particular dish. It wasn't what they expected to see. They took a photo of it and they commented and sent that feedback by way of a review on Facebook to the company. Now, the company wasn't checking their Facebook regularly, so they didn't respond to the review. But straight away, in the meantime, several other people got on and said they sort of put their 2 cents in, and it really escalated quite quickly. Before this company knew it, and as they became aware of the situation, it had already gone on to like a Perth Now social media page. Or another social media page. By that stage, there were thousands of comments on it, and the image had been republished. It was then on the news that evening. So something as simple as a dish not being how a customer expected it to be has ended up on primetime news, which is just, absolutely mind-blowing to think. But how they could have done that better is obviously responded to that review and that comment straight away. But before that, they could have actually trained staff to sort issues prior to a customer leaving the establishment, or look for signs, look for cues, ask questions of a customer. How are they enjoying their meal? That kind of thing. So I believe sometimes with customers in a face-to-face sense, it's the quiet ones that you have to worry about. They're the ones that complain to you up front, generally want a resolution. You can resolve that. And if you do resolve that complaint efficiently and effectively, chances are it'll never go online. But these ones that don't complain and then get online later and can pose the biggest issue. So like I said, that simple example, and you know what it was? The dish was nachos. It was just a very, very minor thing. It didn't look how the customer expected it to be. There was a very good reason why, but it all got very out of hand. So make sure that you're onto complaints before people leave your establishment, but also make sure that you're trying to generate positive PR from them. So encouraging them to get on your socials. And that sort of leads into engaging with them. So how can you help to bring that positive PR from your customers? Well, there's 3 elements to engaging with your customers on social media. First of all, it's to listen, then to talk, and then to support. And they're all very interlinked. So in terms of supporting, I'll start with supporting. Supporting is to direct people to channels where they can talk to you. So having links to your socials on your website, on your email signatures, in store, if you've got a bricks and mortar establishment, advertising your social channels so people know where to go if they want to connect with you in a social sense. Make sure that you advertise them far and wide. And make it easy for them to find should they want to reach out to you. Listening to them then happens if you've supported them, the next stage would be that you can then listen to feedback. Well, they can talk back to them is the 3rd stage. So listening to what they're saying can come in a couple of forms. It can tell you, it can be social monitoring. It can be tracking mentions, tracking competitors, tracking specific events. There's social monitoring tools that you can actually set up. There's obviously Google alerts that you can set up as well to listen. One thing to keep in mind, monitoring is one thing, and monitoring tells you what's being said, but listening tells you why. So that whole approach of the bigger picture will tell you why it's being said. Then the next stage is talking. So you can then talk back to them. You can talk and engage with customers on social media. You can engage with influencers. You can talk with pictures. You can talk with media releases. Talk to customers when they're physically with you as well, and encourage them to continue that conversation online. So you have to be doing all three of those elements. You absolutely have to be listening to what's being said. You definitely have to be talking back and talking outside of just your customer base as well. But you have to support people so that they know where they can talk and how they can talk to you. So hopefully that makes sense. Make sure that you're covering each of those three elements to really be able to allow you to really engage with your customers. However, a crisis may strike. Even if you've done absolutely everything right, it can strike. But the best way to get through a crisis, and the most effective way to get through a crisis, is to have a plan before a crisis strikes. Even if you anticipate that a crisis will never strike in your organization, have a crisis plan. Now, in that plan, there's a few key elements. The first one is identifying a spokesperson who's going to talk to the media. The next thing is that spokesperson being timely, so providing information very, very quickly, being honest and being open and transparent. So that's absolutely crucial, particularly with what we know about social media, how everyone controls our message, and consumers are so empowered. There's no point trying to cover up absolutely anything. That honesty, the openness and the transparency is absolutely crucial. Obviously, you need to keep your employees and other stakeholders informed, but you communicating with your customers is absolutely crucial. You can do that on social media, you can do that through traditional media, but update them early and update them often. So in my career, I have been involved in a couple of crisis situations. Both were not expected whatsoever. One was with my own business, whereby an accident happened, and the accident didn't happen in my business, but it happened in a similar business. So it was assumed that it was our business. So I did have a crisis plan. As soon as I heard about the incident occurring, I actually reached out. So I had built up really good media relations. I had a great database of media contacts. I could see the story evolving. I reached out to the media and said to them, this wasn't our organization, because we were just in the media the week before. So I knew that the first thing the media would think was link us and the situation. And we were in the media for a positive reason the week before. So I reached out to them. I said, this was not us. Just so you know, I don't know any details, but just being clear, this was not our organization. And that nipped it in the bud straight away. Obviously, an accident of any sort gets a lot of attention, but it was absolutely crucial to us that just because the media had that familiarity with our business, it was really important to me that they didn't immediately assume that we were the only business of our type, because they were aware of us. So as it turned out, I made a few phone calls on the day, made a bit of contact with people. They did assume it was us, but I got in before anything even went on social media, and I was able to control that message a little bit, and I didn't refer back to who it was. And obviously, you know, from an etiquette perspective, I wasn't making any assumptions about anything I didn't know, nor communicating that, but I was very clear that it was not our organization. So the correct information was published. What the risk is in a crisis situation is that anything is published, because crisis situations tend to attract instant attention from the media. So having that plan is really important. In our plan, I was the spokesperson. I had the contacts. I was very timely in terms of very quickly getting that information out, and really stopped a massive fallout for our organization. Another example, of a PR crisis was not an accident situation, but another organisation that I was assisting in had a similar thing. A crisis struck, and they were not expecting it, and not anything that they could control. So something completely beyond their control. Things like COVID can be things that happen in your organisation that are beyond your control, where your organisation might have had a COVID case with one of your customers. So how do you handle that? How do you quickly update your customers and the media what you're doing about it in terms of, you know, your deep cleaning, how long you're closed, all of those kind of things are absolutely crucial. So it's not uncommon. Don't ever think that it won't happen to you. And I genuinely hope that it will not, but have a plan just on the off chance that it does, and you will get through it a lot more effectively. All right, so we've just about come to the end of today's webinar. I really do hope it's given you a better understanding of the PR, and that paid, earned, shared and owned elements, and that you're more confident to be able to build your brand across all of those areas, or at least looking at ways that you can build your brand across all areas, not just certain ones. So some top tips to build your brand are, first of all, to always factor in that peso model and don't leave out any component. Create media releases. They are important. Think about crafting compelling stories on new and interesting things that happen in your business. Aim for a target of at least a few per year. And remember, with small businesses, quite often the story sits with the people. So promote your expertise and that of others within your business. And do that in your owned, your earned and your shared media. Make it personal and tell your story, or tell your brand story. Now, for cheap and effective PR, look at sponsorship or participating in charitable or community events. Make sure they're relevant to your industry and relevant to your business. Also, again, make sure that their audience matches yours. So if you're going to sponsor a particular event, for example, and all the participants at that event are going to be people that are highly likely to purchase your product or service, then that's a good match. So that audience, knowing your target audience and matching them is absolutely crucial. I would also encourage you to reach out to influencers that are in your industry or that influence your consumer base. They do work, but just do your homework. And my last recommendation here is to use Google Alerts to track what's being said about you online. So that comes into that listening element that I mentioned. Set them up in your Google account. Basically, you choose a few keywords that Google will then report on. So once they're set up, you'll get a notification via email anytime those keywords appear online. So in saying that, make the keywords specific. Don't make them too generalized. And those alerts, you know, you might have a blogger come in and experience your product or service, and they blog about you, even though you weren't aware at the time that they could have been a paid customer. But this allows you to track that kind of thing, or there could be other things popping up online. So absolutely take advantage of that. All right, well, that's it from me on media and PR for small business. If you do have any questions, drop them in now. I'll stay online and answer them. Keep in mind, we've just scratched the surface. So if you're wanting to know more, you can book a one-on-one appointment with me or any of our other advisors. We've got an amazing range of advisors that have really specific skills in a huge number of different areas. So if you're not already part of the Digital Solutions Program, which is the federal government program, I would encourage you to join. So you get 7 hours of business mentorship for just $44. So hugely valuable. And that's, like I said, across a range of different areas. There is some key eligibility criteria. So you must have an ABN and in WA, Queensland or NT. You must be running a for-profit business. So you don't have to have made a profit, but you can't be a not-for-profit. And you have to employ fewer than 20 staff. So keep that in mind. Absolutely take advantage of this great program. I'd highly recommend that you do that. And like I said, I'll stay online now. So if you've got any questions, fire away. But thanks so much for your time today. I do really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best with your PR.